I'm going to tell you a little bit about our Phillips refinery first. Sean mentioned this morning that he's been looking at Sigmafine as using it in addition to the accounting, but also as an operational tool. And I'm going to kind of focus on the accounting side of it. Our refinery was built in 1942 by the U.S. government, and it has the distinction of being the only refinery that was built from the ground up during World War II. It was purchased by Phillips in 1947. We're located about 60 miles south of Houston in Old Ocean, Texas. And we have a rather large refinery. We have 2 marine terminals, a crude storage terminal, and a salt dome storage terminal. And at the refinery, we have about 900 employees. Our refinery has a crude capacity of 247,000 barrels a day, and we run both heavy and light crudes. Our product slate, we do have a high percentage of transportation fuels, but we also do a lot of specialty chemicals. As was mentioned in the introduction, we also do all the accounting for our neighboring joint venture partner, Chevron Phillips Chemicals. So our product accounting model actually includes not only the refinery, but also the chemical complex. And we basically receive and ship by all modes of transportation. We have marine terminals, we have lots of pipelines, a truck and rail system for both receipts and shipments, and we also have petroleum coke. And on top of this, we're currently in the midst of a $3 billion capital project to build a new fractionator as part of our midstream growth program, which is going to start up in late 2015. And just to kind of give you a little bit of history about our use of Sigmafine, we began using Sigmafine 3 in 1998. That was before I was here with Phillips, but I know that Carlos was instrumental in getting that implemented at the refinery. At that point in time, our system was primarily used for mass balancing. We did export a lot of the data into Access databases, and we used that for reporting, but for the most part, the Sigmafine model itself was primarily just used for mass balancing. After using Sigmafine 3 for many years, we finally were able to get a project approved to cut over to 4.5 in October of 2012. And we've got 5 refineries that are in the process of converting over right now to 4.5, and we were the first one, so we were kind of the guinea pig. Some of the benefits that we saw from the upgrade, as I mentioned, we had a lot of Access databases. We had pretty much an Access database for every different report. Access databases are okay, but you have to understand Access really well to be able to make changes to them. We had a lot of IT support that was required because of the Access databases. We also had several Visual Basic programs that had kind of been homegrown within Sweeny Refinery, and so we were able to eliminate all of those things as a part of our implementation. And then again, we also implemented a lot of spreadsheets, which I'll talk about a little bit more. One of the other benefits that we really found was that with 4.5 is that the transparency of where the data is coming from is a lot more transparent. As Sandeep was mentioning, between the pi points, and you can actually see the pi tag that it's coming from, or if it's a formula that's calculating, you can actually see the formula. That makes it much easier for our users. And we do have quite a few formula calculations that we do contain within data references in Sigmafine. Another benefit is with the chemical company, we do have a lot of gas streams. We do reporting in both pounds, barrels, and standard cubic feet for a lot of our different streams. We were able to do all of the fuel oil equivalent barrels calculations within Sigmafine, which previously we were doing outside in Access databases and spreadsheets and that sort of thing. We are big fans of the Excel add-in. We did have custom reports built for some of our main reports, but we use the Excel add-in pretty much every day for different things. I'll show you one real simple example of something that we use it for in a minute, but we really do like the Excel add-in. And then probably one of the biggest benefits that I can see from our upgrade is that we've really made our work processes a lot more efficient. It's really nice having one system to learn versus 10 different shadow systems to learn. I mean, everything is within the Sigmafine database. All of our information for all of our yield accounting is there. So it makes it much easier for cross-training with new employees. It really has helped us with workload balance. Okay, this is a very small picture of our model. As I mentioned, we have data for 3 different companies, not only the Phillips 66 refinery, we also have the Chevron Phillips NGL and olefin units. In addition, we have our coker unit is actually owned by another one of our joint ventures, and so that's all incorporated within our model. Our model has about 40 units, 450 meters, 250 tanks, and about 600 nodes. So it's a rather large-sized model. And this is just a list of some of our customers. Obviously, our finance group uses our charge and yield. As Sean mentioned, our optimization and business services group uses a lot of the data that we provide from our charge and yield and from our process reports. Our joint venture partners, as most of you, if you're in the accounting world, you know, we have a lot of reporting to government agencies. So we use Sigmafine reporting to get a lot of that information. Solomon, which is a benchmark study for refineries, that information is used for Solomon reporting, and then, of course, our commercial customers. Some of the primary uses of Sigmafine, obviously from an accounting standpoint, this is how we record the physical volumes and the mass of all of our incoming receipts and outgoing shipments. We keep all of our physical inventory volumes within Sigmafine. We record a lot of custody transfers between our joint ventures, so it's not only, you know, important for the outside customers, but within our joint ventures, because that is cash transactions that are happening. It's very important for those meters to be working the best that they can and for that information to be valid information. And then we are also a foreign trade zone at the refinery, which means that we have some benefits with U.S. Customs, and so our Sigmafine model and all the reporting that comes from that also provides the data for that as well. As been mentioned by several people, we do material balance reporting using Sigmafine and also gain and loss analysis. We look at the reporting not only as complex, but also to do unit balancing that we provide to our process engineers. We have the same problem that some of you guys talked about, is just getting them to look at the data because there's such valuable data that's out there. But again, that's part of our role. And then, as I mentioned, government reporting. Another thing we use is we've got several patent royalties where, you know, they're based on various streams and meters, and some of those, as someone mentioned, are not measured flows, but it's a good way for us to show evidence of what those flows are for royalty calculations. And obviously, we've kind of talked about this a lot today as far as why mass balancing is important, but as I mentioned, with our joint ventures, we do have an additional need to have good meters and to have good information. So that is an additional thing that we have that some of the other places may not have. It is our source database for all of our accounting. Basically, we submit the inventory reports, the charge and yields, process reports. All of that information goes to our accounting department, and it's one central database for all of that. And then we also run composition tracking on our crude oil to track the types of crude oil that we receive and what's stored in the tanks and what's charged to we have 2 crude units. And kind of what Carlos asked me to talk about a little bit today is the compliance part, the compliance regulations that Sigmafine kind of contributes to and helps us with. Sarbanes-Oxley, for those of you that aren't in the accounting world, it was actually created after all of the Enron mess. It's legislation that basically says that it's management's responsibility to have internal controls. What happens is, particularly for public companies, is auditors come in every year and they look at those controls and make sure that they're working properly. And it's not just as much as basically saying that you're doing it. You also have to have evidence that you're performing those controls. So one of our key controls that we have at Sweeny Refinery is that our mass balancing is a control over our inventory volumes and our receipts and shipments. Because we feel like if we weren't doing mass balancing, we would have a lot more opportunity for errors in those areas. So that is one of our key controls. I mean, we have others too, but Sigmafine contributes to this key control. So what we do is we kind of have set some tolerances that we use on a daily basis because we balance every day, and we make sure that we stay within those tolerances, and if we are outside of those tolerances, that we basically understand why and explain why. And when we first went to Sigmafine, we were kind of talking about what we could do to kind of make sure that we can show evidence of our mass balancing. So we looked at, there are several indicators that some of you may be familiar with that we use to kind of make sure, to basically show evidence that we are mass balancing the complex on a daily basis. One of them is the DX1, which is the imbalance indicator. And this is straight out of the Sigmafine manual, but basically it just quantifies the overall quality of initial measurements by examining imbalances at all material balance points. The operating target that Sigmafine recommends is a ratio of less than 10%. And for our refinery, we actually have set our own goal of 5%, and we typically get around 3%. And then we also look at the reconciled correction indicator, which is the DX2, and the DX3, the tolerance indicator. So these are 3 indicators that we track every day to basically ensure that we are getting balanced to a level that we want to be at. As I mentioned, we balance daily, so we track those 3 indicators each day. If we have a case that does not meet those criteria that I just mentioned, then we provide an explanation for the day. Sometimes that will happen when you've got unit shutdowns and startups. I mean, you have things going on that maybe are kind of out of the norm. And so, that's obviously an explanation for that. But on a normal day-to-day basis, if we're kind of outside that tolerance, then we feel like it's our responsibility to try to figure out if there's a problem with the data, whether it be meters or inspection reports or inventory gauges or what. And then what we actually do is our finance manager reviews this tracking that we do. We actually pull the results using an Excel add-in. We pull out those 3 indicators, the DX1, DX2, and DX3, track them by day, and then the finance manager at the end of the month reviews that and signs off, and that is our evidence of our control, which satisfies our Sarbanes-Oxley evidence as the fact that the mass balancing is being completed. There's a couple other areas where particularly Sigmafine 4 has done a really good job with helping us in meeting audit requirements. One is the Active Directory that's used for all the access and security controls. It's just a really easy way for us to monitor who has access to the system and who should have access to the system. There's a lot of security over the SQL Server database, which is something we really didn't have when we were in the old system using Access databases because, they're just in a shared directory and anybody can get to them, whereas now with the SQL Server database, there's a lot more control over that. And then another thing that we really use a lot is the ability to see when people change data. When somebody's balancing and they have a tank gauge come in and it's obviously wrong because based on the data coming in and out of the tank or that sort of thing, whenever they make a change that's kind of outside of the norm, we have them use the comment fields on the adjustment, and it tracks the user that made the change, the time and date that the change was made, and then also we have them put an explanation in to kind of explain why they changed it. And that allows us to see when we have bad data, and it also tracks it for audit purposes. So if an auditor came in and said, hey, this gauge read 10 feet and used 5 feet, why did you do that? We've got documentation for that. And as I mentioned, we use the Excel add-in quite a bit. We also have some other, we call them our check sheets that we use for various pieces of data. And it's just a real simple exception reporting that we use to look for things that might be missing. It may be things that don't necessarily affect the mass balance, but it may be things that might affect the reporting later in the month. So it's just a good way for us to kind of stay on top of it and make sure that all the data that's coming into the database is complete and accurate. So some of those things that we might look for is if we're missing an API or if we have a meter that was maybe in service yesterday and it's out of service today, kind of just trying to understand, make sure that was intended to happen, that sort of thing. And then, as Carlos mentioned, we kind of had a little bit of a wish list that we, in regards to audit and controls and that sort of thing, is one of the things that we had requested is that we wanted the ability to be able to lock a case, because once you're done with this, particularly after you're done with the whole month and you've done your reporting, being able to lock that case so that somebody doesn't even just inadvertently make changes to it. We've had all kinds of things happen. We've uploaded transfers to the wrong day, that kind of thing. Those things happen when you have processes in place. But the ability to lock a case after you're completely done is something that we're really looking forward to, which I understand is coming out with the next release. So one other thing that we do, as we mentioned, we balance every day. So a lot of times we don't have all the final information, maybe a final API or a final volume either on maybe a receipt or a shipment And so even though we're balancing with estimated information, a lot of times because we're using this as an accounting system, we have to agree to final inspector reports numbers or final pipeline tickets or that sort of thing. So there are some adjustments that have to be made sometimes kind of outside of the balancing. And we try to just control that because that's kind of, since we're using the balancing as our key control, we want to make sure that we're not doing a lot of that. But that's something else that we're kind of working with Sigmafine on. And that was really it.